Okay, we're going to officially start. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for Prevue InFocus Live, co-sponsored by iMeet. Today we have episode number 6, and it's an exciting topic, one that we've been really looking forward to talking with our leaders about, and it is top leaders on top trends. And it seems like every day we have a new top trend. First of all, let me get some business out of the way. We have a $100 Amex e-gift card that we'll be giving away at the end of the program. So stay with us, and hopefully one of you will be excited to be the winner. Let's meet our panelists. We've got a great group of leaders with us today. I'd like to start with John PINO. John is CEO and founder of iMeet, and iMeet is one of the co-sponsors of Prevue InFocus Live. John, would you share with us a few words about your background and vision? John.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and we're really thrilled to be sponsoring the entire series with Prevue Magazine. This InFocus Live series has been just tremendous and exhilarating. So it's a pleasure to be here personally today. My background, been in the industry over 30 years. Right now I'm the CEO and founder of iMeet, and as I mentioned earlier, we are the worldwide community for people who plan meetings and events. Our membership has topped over 100,000, closer to 110,000. We're in 174 countries around the world, and still growing pretty dramatically. So we're really thrilled about the way people have embraced what we're up to. Prior to that, I was the founder and CEO of a company called Starsight. Some of the attendees today may know that technology company. It is still one of the leaders today. It was involved in spend management, attendee management, sourcing, delivery of things like visibility, savings, and control to corporate clients. And then prior to that, that was sold to the Active Network, who has brought some new life into it back in the end of 2011. And then prior to that, I was the CEO of a company called McGettigan Partners, which at the time was one of the largest meeting and event management companies in the world. We had a really good time with that, and obviously that was sold also. That was sold to Maritz. So that's my background. Just like new things, and I've got that entrepreneurial disease. So it's good to be with you, Virginia.
Thank you, John. Glad you're with us, and entrepreneurial indeed. Let's meet Mike Lyons. Mike is Executive Director for AIBTM, and he's with Reed. And I'd like Mike to talk with us a little bit about his background and also the relationship of AIBTM to Reed and the vision. Mike?
Well, thank you very much, Virginia. And John, great to see you as always, and a pleasure for me to be here as well today. So my background, this actually is the 40th anniversary of my career in the hospitality industry this year. So I'm pretty excited to still be banging around the industry, as I tell people. And I've had the privilege of working for a number of great companies, including McGettigan Partners with John many years ago, and companies like Carlson, Wagon Lee. I ran a destination management company in Philadelphia, GEP Philly, for about 8 years, and have worked in a variety of other companies, both in the corporate travel sector as well as the meetings and incentives business. So I've really had an opportunity to get involved in all facets of the business over the course of my career. And I was very pleased and happy to receive an opportunity this past summer to join Reed Travel Exhibitions and to head up the America's Incentive Business Travel Meetings Exhibition, which is taking place in June in Chicago. So I started with Reed on October the 1st. So we're excited about our show coming up in just a couple of months. For those of you that may not be familiar, Reed Travel Exhibitions manages a number of travel exhibitions all over the world, and in places like Beijing and Australia. We just finished this past week our GIBTM in Abu Dhabi. And earlier this year, we finished our AIM show, our Australia meetings and exhibition show. So we cover all corners of the earth, and I'm proud and pleased to be working on the one show that we do have here in the United States, AIBTM.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us, and John as well. And we've got an exciting program, and let's get started. By the way, I just flew back from Australia myself. Great place for MICE events. Great people and wonderful infrastructure. But let's talk about some of the trends. There's so many, and I'm just curious which trends you both feel are some of the top 2 or 3, and then we'll drill down from there. Let's start with John, because one of the key areas right now has to do with the growth and explosion in the technology sector. And John, obviously you have a great handle on that. And John, your thoughts on the trends for the MICE industry as it relates to technology?
Okay, I think this is a great topic, and it's one that we could spend probably hours on. But in thinking about this in terms of how the trends have changed and maybe how they're evolving, it comes down to me, broadly speaking, into 3 buckets. The first one, of course, has to do with technology. And I think better and more useful technology is the key to this, because technology in its own right isn't new, but it's gone from being very interesting to being absolutely necessary. And then everyone has this dilemma, and that is, how do we all digest all of this information? How do we consolidate all of the options, right? They're out there, they're incredible, and they're growing, and they're improving every single day. So first and foremost, I think the MICE industry is dealing with better and more useful technology. In addition to that, the second thing I'd point out is in the area of budgeting, what I call fiscal sophistication. Right? We've gone from budget cuts and all kinds of focus on expenses to spend management. And that is a huge, huge leap. So a lot of the folks on today's call I know are engaged in strategic meeting management or SMM initiatives. And these processes are great. They promote smart buying all through the process. They've got great reporting. And the strategies actually optimize cost and results, not just cost. So I like the idea that we're all becoming more fiscally sophisticated. And then last but not least, a place where I live every day, it's the issue of staying connected. We all are in so many different ways communicating. There's an explosion of communication options. Social media is obviously at the heart of it all. We all understand that. But this has trained us to be expecting more instant access to information, solutions, processes, etc. So I think in the MICE industry, all of this translates into a skill that's becoming even more necessary, and that is for planners to anticipate needs of attendees and anticipate needs of their sponsoring executive, because right now that's the most important skill. Things are changing so much, the industry's changing so much, it's a new whiteboard, it's completely empty, and there's lots we can do about it. So those are the way I would categorize the 3, Virginia.
Thank you, John. Mike, I'd like to segue to you from your perspective in terms of technology and use of the various medium as it relates to your side of the business. Mike?
Well, you know, it's very interesting because we now have all of this technology at our fingertips, all these gadgets, and we're using all these apps and so forth. And yet, at the end of the day, what's really interesting is that now more than ever, face-to-face meetings are critically important. And that is why, in fact, our industry is on a growth path where people are still putting meetings together. They're still coming to trade shows because of the importance of that face-to-face connection and getting to build relationships with people. You can't do that through technology. Technology is an enabler, and a lot of those gadgets that we carry around with us help us to be much more efficient, and they're great tools. But at the end of the day, business is still business, and business is about building relationships and building trust and confidence between 2 people so that you want to do business together. So in our case, for example, at our show at AIBTM in June, our keynote speaker actually is going to be speaking on the fact that face-to-face meetings are more important today, more so than ever, and that from a human relationship, we need to be able to shake hands and sit and talk and meet and build those relationships with people. So yes, I think clearly technology is here. It's going to continue to improve, and there's going to be even greater gadgets 5 years from now. You got to remember, Twitter wasn't even around a few years ago, as were many of the other things that we take for granted today.
5 minutes.
But I think clearly the message here is that as an industry, we're still going to be putting meetings together. We're still going to be bringing people together. We still have to connect people, human beings, face to face, and that's not going to go away, thankfully for all of us in the industry.
Well, the trajectory
I would absolutely agree.
Technology is off the chart, but I think you both make very good points, and both are needed and tracking simultaneously. Let's switch a little bit and go to our first poll and get our participants' response. Are budgets growing, decreasing, or staying the same for the mice meetings industry? And that'll key us into perhaps some of our next top trends. We see some of the responses coming in. Staying the same, looks like it's taking off there at about 71+%. Decreasing and growing is small, which might have to do with the economy. What are your thoughts, John and Mike, on the issue of budgets?
Yeah, I'll jump in first, Mike, but I think this is an interesting poll in that the staying the same number is as large as it is. I want to remind everyone that over the last 3 years, that number was decreasing. That number was constantly decreasing. And the fact that we have this staying the same as the largest piece of what we see in our audience of participants around the world, and then putting on top of that the second one, which is growing, right? I think this sort of supports the idea that the industry as a whole is beginning to enter a new cycle of growth. Slowly maybe, but entering a new cycle of growth. So that to me just confirms what we're seeing, and yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be in this spot.
Mike?
Well, I think, John, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think that clearly all of us coming out of this recession after these last 4 years have been very cautious. So that number that I see there staying the same means that people have kind of poked their head out and said, yeah, the sun's coming out again, but it's not completely out. There's still a couple of clouds, and they're not really sure we're completely out of the woods yet. But these are all very, very encouraging signs. I think what's happened through the course of this recession is we're now in a new normal, and everybody has learned to do more with less. Budgets have, in fact, absolutely been decreased. In our meetings world, I remember years ago, and you do too, John, when we used to put on gala, lavish events where money was no object. Well, that's just not the case anymore today. People are very, very careful about what they're spending their money on, and in the old days, you know, when you'd have a lot of great decor and lighting and all this wonderful fancy stuff to go along with your party, many of those things just get cut nowadays because of this new environment that we're living in, this new normal. But clearly, people feel that we're out of the woods to a certain extent, although perhaps not completely, and that is why you see that number down there staying the same, about 65%. I would expect in the next year or two, if all the economic indicators, which right now our stock market is way up, you know, the best it's been in years, those things will start to drive those numbers up.
Yeah.
Let's go to our next poll. We were talking a little bit as we were leading into the meeting about domestic versus international, and John was indicating a huge growth in some of the international sectors that haven't been as engaged but now are. So let's see the next poll. Do you see the number of international MICE meetings increasing, decreasing, staying the same? And the polling is coming in, and it looks like, very interestingly, we've got increasing at about 33%, decreasing 14%, staying the same. There's still a few people voting. Yeah, they're still voting. It's fluctuating. Looks like we're getting close to lockout. 58. Well, very interesting. On the international, it looks like an increase has taken the top slot. Staying the same is about the top slot at 50%, staying the same at about 38.8%, and decreasing 11%, which really ties into what we were talking about earlier, doesn't it?
Oh, I think it does. It's sort of interesting, Virginia, because if you underscore the word international in that poll, I think it says volumes about what we were talking about earlier, which is that the industry is becoming truly global. And you see more and more organizations, companies, attracting people with a global perspective and actually holding those events outside their home country. It doesn't have to be just U.S. Anything outside your home country is international, and we see lots of that occurring. I think it's also a tie to the economic conditions that Mike was referring to a little bit earlier, in that people are starting to say it's time to just do a bit more. Maybe not all the way. They're not throwing the throttle all the way down, but this is great indication of where we see the industry, and I'm happy to see our audience confirm that.
Mike, any thoughts?
Well, again, I think this is a reflection of the fact that when you really analyze this, companies, organizations, corporations are expanding all over the world in whatever industry they happen to be in. So they're setting up offices in China, they're setting up offices in Latin America, and so forth. So simply because of that, it makes sense logically that a lot of the meetings that we used to have in the United States are now taking place in Rio or in Beijing or in Singapore or in places like that. Again, a reflection of the fact that all of these organizations are doing business in those other parts of the world. It's not just on the incentive side, although the incentives for sure.
Yes, but also a large expansion within what has been traditionally called the third world countries. Out of the traditional context of international. Any thoughts about that? And you touched on it, sort of Brazil and some of the maybe Africa and so on.
Yeah, I think one thing that we should all note is that those areas that you mentioned, and some of them are not new to this, but their expansion rates are so dramatic. Right. Middle East, China, India, we all know about. And sometimes people overlook the incredible explosion of business in Latin America. Latin America meaning Mexico, Central America, and South America. And those areas are seeing tremendous influx of new meetings, international programs that they hadn't had previously, or at least to the extent that they're having today. It's very exciting. And the other piece that I want to point out is that those countries are sending more and more meetings outside their home country as well. So, boy, you got to make sure you're global in your thinking, right, Mike? I mean, I know AIBTM focuses on this all the time, but you got to be global in your thinking, or you're just missing the biggest trends that are happening. Yeah.
Mike, any follow-up?
No, I agree completely with John. I mean, this is clearly where we are going as an industry for sure.
I mean, look at Colombia. Look at Colombia, for example, which really was not on the radar until relatively recently, and they're making great strides in reaching out and engaging the mice industry, just as an example. Yep. Let's go to our next poll, because it gets into something that has been a touchstone in a lot of different conversations lately, and that's the issue of green or sustainable tourism and travel. Will green or sustainable elements become a greater part of your meeting planning and implementation? One of the concerns is that if you have everybody, for instance, rushing to, I'll just use Egypt and Cairo, that will wear down the pyramids with the numbers of people. So whether that's an issue or not, let's see what everybody thinks. It looks like we've got, my gosh, pretty clear. 75% plus think that it will become a greater part of their planning process, planning and implementation. Maybe about 20% there's no response to the no. So that tells us that there's a lot of movement going on there. Now we're at about 81% saying yes, there will be green or sustainable elements as part of their planning. Let me open it up. Mike, any thoughts from your perspective, and what have you seen as you've put together, for instance, AIBTM and some of the other trade shows?
Well, I think clearly, and this is obviously a very positive thing for us all to see, that everyone is committed to saving the planet, which has taken us 20 or 30 years to get to this point. I don't think that we're going back. I think that everybody's slowly but surely getting on the bandwagon, and that we are, in fact, implementing a number of measures that are going to help across the board. And when you look at meetings that are put together nowadays, it's pretty rare even to see bottled water at meetings. You'll see that we'll have the 5-gallon water tanks. But you know, it's just little things like that. I know that we're working with McCormick Place in Chicago, which is one of the most sustainable centers in the country, in terms of how they manage all of the waste and all of the recycling that comes out of that building week after week. And it's an incredibly complex job, but at the end of the day, the impact that that's having, it's incredible. And I think also, you know, you look at the fact that companies are now starting to really consider the carbon footprint, and how much does it cost to send 100 people on airplanes to a given city, and what is that carbon footprint that they're causing because of that. So decisions are now being made as it relates to where people are taking folks to the meetings in light of how do we be more sustainable and more green in our approach to transportation, in our approach to food, in our approach to what do we do with all those brochures that are left over after the trade show is done. You know, all of those kinds of things have to be accommodated in the conversation.
John, any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, I think this is something that will continue to emerge and evolve, and I think it's interesting to just think about why. Besides all the history that we know and everything that Mike mentioned, the first thing he said was that we all want to save the planet, and that's not just a gimmick, right? I think it's in the social fabric of the human race. I think you're seeing more and more of this, and as Mike pointed out, I think there's a few things we could look forward to. Maybe not overnight, but Mike mentioned carbon footprint measurement, and I do believe that part of corporate social accountability for companies running meetings is going to say, how are we doing in this particular area? Because this is really, really important. Meetings are not going to go down, they're going to go up. There's more and more people who are going to be more conscious of how these meetings are being run. And I think measuring carbon footprints in the future is going to be interesting. I would also say that on this topic, it's a worldwide phenomenon. I don't believe it's just the industrialized countries. I think you're seeing it more and more and more everywhere. And it's only the depth of awareness that may be a little bit different, but it's catching up all over the world. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future we be looking at, you know, concrete rules around how meetings are done in the area of sustainability. And I would even say, watch out, you might see some legislation down the road to make sure this happens. So it's here to stay. I think our members have validated that. And it's a great thing. It's a great thing. It just brings another level of accountability.
Certainly, probably the corporate sector is leading this, as they have to be cognizant of their footprint on the corporate broad side, not just their meeting side. Let's drill down to a fun area, and that is F&B. New trends there. Any thoughts? Food and beverage. Well, I'll start. I know Mike's grinning. He's got a bunch. I know he does. But I will start. Obviously, there's a few things I want to mention. Obviously, the trend is toward healthier and lighter. And, everybody wants their folks to be high energy, very aware, sharp, not lethargic, and we are what we eat. So at the end of the day, everybody wants, not only for themselves, we're all more conscious of it,
but I think organizers want their folks to be more energetic. So yeah, that's one. And then the other thing I would mention as a trend that I've seen, and that is that look at the way planners are looking at food and beverage. Breakfast and lunch are light, it's healthy, it's flexible. There's things that people can go grab during the session. It's not that structured, full American breakfast buffet every day. It's not that. That's gone. Breakfast, lunch, and breaks are much more healthy. However, that said, what I have seen is that, at least from the corporate perspective, they don't want to completely eliminate some celebratory evening functions, right? You work all day, you've got all this stuff going on, and I'm not talking about unhealthy, but I am talking about food and beverage being impressive. We remember food, let's be honest, everybody. It's something that defines experiences. So basically I see that, and my last comment is, watch for food and beverage executives to play a bigger role in the sales process. Because as people go and do site inspections, yeah, the facility's fantastic, but if they could sit down with a planner who's innovative and creative and talk about menu planning that fits a goal and a need, boy, that's worth a ton. So I predict that chefs and food and beverage executives are going to be doing a whole lot more selling.
And in fact, you've touched on something that I think is a bigger trend, and that is a team approach to meetings and incentive on the hotel side as well as the DMC side. Mike?
Well, John, you set me up very well for this, because interestingly enough, at AIBTM this coming June, we're working with the chef from Savor, who's at McCormick Place, because our opening keynote luncheon is actually going to be a boxed lunch, a choice of 3 different menus of brain food. And these are the types of foods, and then we have a session that ties in and explains what we served, why it was served, what was in it, why it is brain food, why it does give us more energy, why it is healthier for us. So we're tying in an educational session along with the actual lunch that we're serving the folks at our keynote luncheon. So clearly this is a very, very important subject for many meeting planners out there who are trying to gauge what's the right balance between foods that we love to eat, which may or may not be good for us, versus these trends of people that are into healthy foods. And so we have to have a more balanced offering, and the quantities are starting to come down, whereas in the old days it was pretty much, hey, just pile it on the buffet plate, as much as you could. So clearly there is a trend there, and you'll note in grocery stores now, gluten-free has become very, very big. There's a lot of folks that are gluten-free, that are vegan, that are vegetarian. There's all of these different folks that we have to accommodate that are coming to our meetings and our trade shows and so forth.
Let me remind everybody, thank you both, and we'll come back to you in a minute, that the participants are welcome to ask questions. So as you type in your questions, we'll filter those into the program, or if you have a comment as well. So feel free to do that as we continue the program. Let me key into AIBTM a little bit here. Can you tell us a little bit about how one attends as a hosted buyer, for instance, or as a vendor, and a little bit about where the people are coming from who attend and why it's important. Mike?
Well, thank you, Virginia. Yes, just for those, the folks that are listening in, AIBTM is going into its 3rd year. The first 2 years AIBTM took place in Baltimore. AIBTM is a major meetings industry show, and we expect about 3,500 people to be in Chicago in June. Of those 3,500, roughly 2,000 of those will in fact be meeting planners. Half of those, about 1,000, will be what we call hosted buyers. Now that term's been around, and I think a lot of people know what it means, but interestingly enough, a lot of people don't. In fact, I've been on a couple of panels recently where there was a lot of interest in really trying to understand what a hosted buyer is. So very briefly, a hosted buyer is a buyer that goes onto our site, registers, and essentially has to be qualified through the business that they do, because our intent is to deliver to the exhibitors buyers that are there to really do business, that are not there just to kick the tires, although they can do some of that as well. But really the intent is to match the exhibitors with the buyers so they can do business. So when our applicants go online and they register with us, they're vetted and approved based on the amount of business that they do. And in return for that, we take care of all the hotel and airline accommodations to Chicago for the duration of the show. There's no cost, there's no registration fee. There's a full day of CEU accredited education sessions, and then 2 full days on the trade show floor. So from the perspective of a planner, in the course of a couple of days, you're able to visit dozens, if not into the hundreds of people that you need to meet with one place and one time. It's like going on a bunch of fam trips. So, and also having the additional education sessions so that you can continue to improve as a professional. And then, of course, we have networking events in the evenings throughout the course of the time. But if you don't want to go as a hosted buyer, there are a lot of organizations that don't allow their people to go. You can come as a trade buyer. So a trade buyer essentially has to pay their own expenses, but it's free registration. They get free education day, and they essentially can come to the show and wander the show floor in a traditional sense. So that's essentially what's going on. It's shaping up to be a really great show, and if anybody's interested, obviously they can go on our website and get information and register right there.
Sounds great, Mike. Thank you so much. You touched on a couple of things in your presentation about AIBTM, and John did as well earlier, that that gives me an idea to ask you about demographics. The demographics of meeting attendees has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and certainly in the last 5 years. Younger, more open, more worldly in some ways, certainly technologically savvy. Can you talk about the trends in terms of the resulting impact of the demographic changes that we're seeing, not just domestically but also worldwide? John, any thoughts along that line?
Yeah, this is something I think we all have to pay particular attention to, because you have demographics defined very differently and also very importantly. So we always talk about the age demographic, and that certainly is occurring. You see more and more young people in our industry, or more and more young people as attendees who have a completely different expectation as to what technology is. We also see more and more women in the workforce, as you know, with dual responsibilities at home of raising families and being a breadwinner, and they have different needs at meetings. And then you have to talk about ethnic demographic changes, because every country, the workforce is multinational. And so you've got all of these things converging at the same time. Now, as it relates to us with technology, I really do believe they are much more tech savvy than we were, say, 30 years ago. And therefore, their expectations at these meetings are different. So you've got an instant need to have and connect to information and relationships. That is absolutely critical. And the other piece about this demographic change is that the way meeting planners are approaching the content and the agendas, Virginia, it's a bit different. In essence, you see more things relating to introspective time. You see more free time being allowed within agendas. Maybe the agendas are being stretched a little bit to allow for breaks within the agenda and things like that. And you're also seeing, obviously, cultural components being put into the meetings itself. So it's all good, but it is a challenge for planners to stay connected to these changing demographics. It's happening all over.
There are many, many more elements to juggle as one plans the meeting now. Mike, thoughts on demographics?
Well, we absolutely have to be cognizant of that as we plan our AIBTM trade show. Because we are having a larger mix of younger folks that are coming into the industry, and their needs and their issues and their concerns and the way that they do business and the way that they communicate and interact. They have obviously a much more comfortable feel for the technology products that we talked about earlier. So we have to make sure that our program, that our sessions are going to accommodate all of the folks that are coming to the show, not just the folks that are the 40s and over, for example. So we do have a number of sessions that are going to speak to some of these subjects that we believe are going to be hot subjects. And in fact, one of our keynote speakers is a gentleman who's going to talk about the millennial generation and the differences and how to work with them and so forth. So clearly, this demographic shift that we are all going through as an industry is one that needs to be addressed, and we have to be responsive to that. And I think that, for example, one of the things at our show that we're excited about is we're going to be getting students from the local Chicago universities engaged in our show by acting as AIBTM ambassadors. We want them to get the experience of being at a major industry trade show, that they can interact with people, that they can go to some of the education sessions, but at the same time, they can serve as ambassadors for our show and be very customer-centric and guide people to the exhibits and so forth and so on. So we're going to have roughly 24 students that are going to be participating, and that's going to be a great learning session for those ladies and gentlemen as they get ready to enter into our workforce in our industry.
Let me key off of that and talk about accreditation. Seems like there are more and more opportunities to be accredited in various areas and also subcategories. Would you both talk about accreditation and the growth in that sector? John?
Yeah, I'll take a quick shot at that. There are so many professional designations, all of which are worthy and important and provide continuing education. And they are not just the initials after your last name, but they are also your experiential ones. So I just want to make the point that in addition to the formalized education, there's experiential education also as a key component of how planners grow in this sector. Look, we've got to make sure that our industry continues to have an ever-increasing and improving reputation. The only way that's going to happen is through education. I know that people do get their certifications. Their experiential piece sometimes is, at least in the last 4 years, has been compromised a bit because of lack of budgets. But I also want to say that looking at an individual's experiential qualifications is another form of accreditation. For example, the way we look at it now in profiles, it's, the old profiles or fill out these 15, lines and tell us all about everything you've ever done. But nobody's really looked at things like, well, in your meeting planning experience, where did you plan meetings? What countries have you visited? How many cities? How many hotels? And so when you start to compile this kind of information, which I call experiential accreditation, I think it's a new and exciting area where planners will get a lot out of it. We're working very hard on that in IMEET, and I don't think it's unique to us. I just think you have to blend your professional education with your experiential, and that package is what makes people unique.
Mike, further comment?
No, I think John covered it very, very well. I think that this is all part of the changing of the guard and the changing of our industry, and that we have to stay ahead of the curve. And as leaders in the industry, I think we have to be out there talking to people and finding out what's on their minds and define the future of meetings together is really what's important. So all of these things play into that. So yeah, I agree completely with John.
Let me take a break here. I have many other questions I can ask, but are there specific trends that you would like to talk about that you feel that are really critical at this juncture? John?
Yeah, I'll stick to technology, Virginia, if I may, just because we live it every day. I think everyone understands the way technology is becoming more adaptable and more practical. We look at it from the perspective of an attendee going to a meeting. The mobile phone, the smartphone continues to blow my mind. I mean, it is just amazing how far it's come. It gets smarter every day. And its usage is going through the ceiling. So applications on the phone are far outpacing applications on the desktop. The pad and the applications for the pad, or the optimization of technology for the pad, is no longer sort of just a cool thing. It is actually a requirement. So I think the way I look at it is, what are the ways that the technology is delivered? And you've got to look at mobile and pad technology as emerging as the most important thing over the next few years. And then you've got to look at, what are you going to do to support that in the MICE industry? So there's a lot of things going on in the attendee sector. There's a lot of phenomenal applications that work toward presence, location strategies, and feeding information. I think it's critical. I think the one thing that people aren't looking as much at in our industry is the support that this new technology can have actually for planners and buyers. So whether it's a way to research faster, get information faster, get quotes faster, connect those planners to other planners around the world. At the end of the day, it's everybody's connected to everybody for whatever purpose you ever want to have. And I think I think that trend, the social media trend, at any time. So it's the social media trend that's here to stay, and the applications that support anything mobile, anything that doesn't tie you to a location exclusively, is where you're going to see a lot of investment over the next few years.
I think on both sides, for the meeting planner side, but also for the attendee side, that also could potentially increase the ROI for the host client, whoever that is, so that you end up with a short, long tail, and a long tail. Short tail and a long tail to that meeting. Mike?
Well, I just want to mention, you mentioned ROI, and we haven't really talked a lot today about ROI, but at the end of the day, it really is all about ROI and creating value. So that we all have, in this day and age, we seem to be stretched 24/7 because of these technology tools. It's hard for us to go to bed without taking one last glance at that BlackBerry and making that one last email. And we just didn't do that 10, 15 years ago. That wasn't part of our lifestyle. So we're getting pushed, not just financially in this new normal, but it's a time issue too. So when you look at ROI, it's what's the ROI on my time investment and what's the ROI on my financial investment. And so a lot of these things that we're all talking about and doing in our industry, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, whether you're a supplier or you're a buyer or what have you. We have those two things that we're trying to deal with. It's the time and the money. And in particular, for us that are being pulled at in 10 different directions in terms of where we need to travel to every year, we only have limited time. So if we have to take 15 trips a year, where are we going? We ask ourselves that in the context of what is the return on my time and money investment to go to that event, to go to halfway across the world, to that conference, to go to this trade show, to go to that MPI event, whatever the case may be, because there's so many things out there nowadays that we have so many choices. And at the end of the day, we all have to ask ourselves, okay, where do I need to invest my time and my money?
Yes, and time is money. So that ROI question becomes critical across the board, regardless of what the trend is that we might be discussing. Are there other trends that we only have a few minutes left, and there's so many issues we could talk about, but are there other burning trends that you feel important to bring to the surface with our participants today? And if so, please, now is the time. John, anything else from your perspective?
Yeah, I would just add maybe for a sector of our audience today, Virginia, who is on the corporate side, you are seeing a convergence of solutions that begin to combine transient travel and group travel. Group travel being, whether it's meetings, incentives, or events that are sponsored, along with transient travel for many, many reasons. You can't open a paper today without talking about big data, right? And everybody's talking about big data and how to crunch it and doing all that stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about that is beginning to be innovated just wasn't easy to do until now. And so what you're going to see is a whole new crop of things coming up. And I actually think strategic meetings management, whatever it is called in 5 years, I've watched that evolution over the last 10, is going to get just more sophisticated and more requirement. It'll be like electricity. You need it, you don't think about it, you just turn it on. And so I do think that you're going to see a lot more there as the next year or two go on. And there's many other trends, but for all of us, I think it comes down to change is opportunity. We've said this for years. Everybody believes in this. This is a time to really innovate. I don't care who is in the audience and what their job is and what they do. They can't be afraid to innovate because it means everything. And at the end of the day, we have no progress without it. So it is engaging, and as Mike said, it is complicated because there's so many things that you could dig your teeth into. But you got to pick your game plan, and but you got to innovate. You can't sit back. You can't wait. You got to create.
And push the envelope a little bit, Mike.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to comment on what John said because he's absolutely right. He nailed it completely. I've been in this industry a long time, and I remember 20 years ago we were talking about meetings consolidation and going to companies and talking about the fact that you're spending $80 million a year on meetings, but nobody knows where that spend is. And we've been working for 20 years as an industry, strategic meetings management. Now the convergence of the corporate travel department and the meetings managers coming under one roof, slowly but surely, because that is such a huge spend when you take all of travel and you take all of the meeting spend together. But now we have the technology, we have the tools, we have the ability, we have the information and the motivation, particularly coming out of this recession. That was definitely a driver to finally get to this place where we started 20 years ago, at least on the corporate side, of trying to really get a handle on these costs. So I think that is probably one of the big trends in the next 5 years or so. We're going to see companies really get a handle and be able to truly manage and measure their spend.
Yeah, and that because partly because of what John said in terms of big data. And the fluidity of that availability and communications makes crunching much more easy and doable. We have an interesting comment from Brant, who's one of our participants, and I'm just going to read what he has written. Question from the audience. Have any of you seen any pushback on mobile? We've had clients who have used mobile in the past who are going back to a more low-tech offline technology because they don't want people with their phones in their hands for various reasons, distractions, etc. Easy access to camera information, sensitive information, etc. at their events or mice meeting events. Either of you comment about low-tech versus high-tech and that rub that we're seeing between the desire to be always connected and the desire to actually hold a significant meeting.
Yep. Yeah, I would say this. I would say that we have to be reminded that we are in a process. And this process of evolution will take some time. There is no question that there are more people looking at mobile and trying mobile than there are backing away from it. But I do believe that Brand has a point. It can be more controlled in a corporate meeting environment, of course, right? How to use your phone, when you don't use your phone, and things like that. But when you're talking about events as large as AIBTM, as an example, it's just a productivity tool first and foremost, and it helps people connect and it helps improve. There's always abuse, and so I think over the next year or so, we're going to see some what I'll call mobile etiquette emerge. I think it's long overdue, even without being at the meetings. But I think Brant's right. You have to be careful, not for overkill. You have to be careful about security and privacy. But I do believe that trend overall is greater than those concerns.
Mike, any follow-up?
Yeah, I agree completely with John. I think he pretty much said it all. There's a balance there. It's not going to go away. Certainly, we're not going to go backwards. There may be some companies or organizations that they come up with stricter guidelines or rules, or as John called it, some etiquette. I get more upset when I'm in a restaurant and I see a couple sitting there at a table and the two of them are not talking at all. They're both looking down at their phone, having a date and a dinner, and they're sitting there texting on each other's phones. And I'm thinking, why are you even here having dinner? So that doesn't apply to meetings, but I'm just saying this is an example of how I think ultimately we have to have some rules around what is appropriate etiquette, both in the business context as well as even in the personal context.
Yeah.
Great comments. We're going to be wrapping up very shortly, and I'd like to remind all of the participants that you can watch these episodes, the current one and past episodes, on iMeet's website, the Prevue magazine website, YouTube, and also listening to them on iTunes. And fairly shortly, we'll do the drawing for the $100 Amex e-gift card. So stay with us, and we're wrapping up very shortly. We just have a couple of minutes left, and John and Mike, I'd like to have an opportunity to suggest any last trend that you feel that is important to mention and engage for our show today. So Mike, any other last thoughts?
Well, yes, the trend that I see is that a lot of people are coming to AIBTM in June in Chicago, which is a great trend, and I'm very happy about that. That's my shameless plug. But seriously, if there's anybody out there that needs more information about our AIBTM show, it's going to be a great one. By all means, you can contact me personally or certainly go on our website. But hope to see a lot of you in Chicago, and it's been a pleasure, Virginia and John, to share this session with you today.
Thank you so much, Mike Lyons, for joining us. Really appreciate it with AIBTM. John Pinto with iMeet. Any last thoughts and comments?
Yeah, when we talk about trends, they're going to change consistently, Virginia. So I think it underscores a couple of things. One, stay connected, do your education, get your experience, go to the AIBTM show in Chicago in June. How's that, Mike? But make sure make sure you're doing your homework because things do change. They never stay quite the same, and it's critically important. The one thing that I would suggest that we could watch for, or hopefully hope for in the industry, particularly on the planner side and the buyer side, is the ability to be able to get more specific information faster from hotels and event venues, such as online availability, online rates. We've been talking about how to get this done for the last, oh my God, my StarSite days, right? We tried hard to do it. But the data, getting back to big data and other things, and smart technology is getting so much better that I do believe at some point this industry is going to have a global marketplace where people can go in and really get a good idea and sense of how to get something done quicker. And I think we're all hoping for that, when we're all rooting for it, right? But that'd be it. And I would like to thank you, Virginia, for coordinating a very tough but fun topic. And Michael, it's always great to see you. And thanks to the members on behalf of iMeet and Prevue Magazine for joining in with us. I know we're going to have many more of this, but this was a blast for us. Thanks, Virginia.
Well, thank you, John and Mike. We really appreciate it. Susan, thank you for your wonderful comment. She said, great job, love the program, and we really appreciate that feedback. Right now, we have a roll to find out who will be randomly selected to get that $100 Amex e-gift card. So let's see what happens. And then Mike Bray, Liz Goad. Liz, congratulations. Really, I hope you're celebrating over there. And Matt will be calling you very shortly with the good news. So thank you all so much. I'm glad you joined us for the 6th episode of Prevue InFocus Live, co-sponsored by iMeet. Take a chance, if you can, to watch past episodes if you missed them, or this episode again, and share them with others. And you can do so through the iMeet website, the Prevue Magazine website, YouTube, and also listen to them on iTunes. Have a great week, and we wish you the best and a most successful career. Take care. Bye-bye.